Hey, Arunava here. What's going on? In this video, we're going to talk about encapsulation and data hiding in Python. I'll assume you're familiar with what classes and objects are in Python. In case you're not, you can check out my video on classes and objects linked in the description section below. And with that, let's get started. Let's first start with coding a class having a few class and instance attributes and a method. Looks good. Now you know that you can access these class attributes and instance attributes using an object of the class and the class name itself. And also you can access methods inside the class using an object of the class. Alright, with that, let's declare some new class and instance attributes. Now notice these new attributes have double underscores at the beginning but not at the end. And let's now try to access these new attributes using the object. So we can see that we are getting an error. And let's also try to access these new attributes using the class name. As we can see, we are getting errors in both the cases. So we can't access these new attributes. And why can't we? Because these are non-public attributes. So whenever you declare attributes with double underscores at the beginning, that attribute becomes a non-public attribute. And unlike a public attribute which is accessible to all, you cannot access a non-public attribute as we saw. And the same applies to a method which is declared with double underscores at the beginning. So if we have a method with double underscores at the beginning, you can see that we are not able to access the method either, because as I said, attributes and methods starting with double underscores are not public, and thus you cannot access them like you do with the public ones. Now we can imagine of the class as a container or bundle or capsule which stores public methods and data accessible to both inside and outside the class, and non-public methods and data which can be accessed just from inside the class. So this technique of packaging or bundling or encapsulating the information in a single unit in a way as to hide what should be hidden and make visible what is intended to be visible is called encapsulation. Now, why should you care about hiding data and methods? So let's take an example, and let's say you have a method called imp inside your class, which is a very useful method to the user of the class. And this method is highly dependent on another method dep also inside the class. And this method dep returns different value for different values of the attribute of the class called addep. So when a user of the class calls on the method imp calls on dep internally and performs some operations on the return value of dep and returns it. And in the process, when dep is called, it returns a value depending on the value of the attribute addep. Good. Now, what happens if addep is public? You see the issue? So, if the attribute addep is public, a user of the class can change the value of addep to something unwanted and thus breaking the working of the function imp. So, you should not have addep as public. So, two underscores before it should do the job of hiding it. Now, you should realize the importance of hiding your data. Now, what about this dep method? Well, it's not used by a user of the class and it's just useful to the internal operations of the class. So, no need having it public either. We should make it non-public too. Thus, we want to hide all attributes and methods that are not meant for the user to call. And this is the concept of data hiding. So, to summarize, data hiding is the technique of hiding the attributes and methods inside a class which are not relevant for the user of the class to call upon, and thus preventing unwanted changes to the data of the class. While encapsulation is the technique of bundling the attributes and methods in a single unit, that is the class, and in the process hiding what needs to be hidden and making visible what needs to be visible. Okay, so now you know about encapsulation and data hiding. Let's now quickly see what setters and getters are. Now, there will be times when you want the user to see what the value of an attribute is, be it public or non-public. This should be achieved using a getter function, which is nothing fancy but just a public function which returns the value of the required attribute. Let's take an example. So say if I want the user to get the value of the attribute has legs, then I can just have a function like this And this returns the value of has legs. Why prefer getters over the normal attribute accessing with the dot operators? Well, you can probably see the issue. If you allow accessing attributes with the dot operator, the user might change the attribute to contain some unwanted value. Moving on to setters, you probably guessed what setters are. So times will come when you want to allow the user to change the value of some attribute. In such a case, you want to use a setter function, which again is nothing fancy but a public method taking in a value and setting the value of the required attribute equal to the value passed. Benefits of using setters? Well, you can check what value the user is trying to set to an attribute, and if it's something that can introduce some bug or is something unwanted, then you can throw an exception. So inside a setter, you should have some checks which checks if the value is unwanted. Let's take an example of a setter to set the value of has legs. For simplicity, here I am just simply checking the value passed to be of bool type. If it is, then I am allowing the user to change the value of has legs, else not. And you can see that the value of has legs is now changed. One of the major reasons why getters and setters are preferred is that the underlying implementation of the class can be changed easily without breaking the code that uses those getters and setters to get and set the values of attributes of the class. Cool, you now know about getters and setters. Alright, before wrapping the video up, I want to say something crucial. If you have noticed, I kept using the word non-public instead of private. Why? Well, it turns out that nothing in Python is really private. So the methods and attributes declared with double underscores, which I showed wasn't accessible using the object or class name, can be accessed using objects or class name after all. With a little trick, let's see that. You just need to add underscore class name, which in this case is person, before the name of the non-public attribute or method you are trying to access using the dot operator, and you'll be able to access those. So you can see that it's executing without running into any errors, and thus you can access these non-public attributes and methods. So you should realize that names of non-public methods and attributes starting with double underscores and not ending with double underscores, like hotel I stayed last night, are textually replaced by underscore the name of the class followed by the name of the non-public attribute or method, using which you can access them as we saw. Alright, you now know how to access non-public attributes and methods using object and class names. Cool. Okay, so thanks for watching the video. If the video was useful, do give it a thumbs up and do share it. And before leaving, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, which by the way is a button object with an on-click method. Okay, so bye-bye, have fun with object-oriented programming and see you all next time.